When my mother passed away, I believed grief would bring my sister and me closer. Instead, it turned us into strangers. She changed the locks. She hid the paperwork. And she thought I would stay silent. My name is Sarah Whitmore. And this is the story of how my sister tried to keep my mom's house until the lawyer called her in. Stay tuned, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story from Family Feud files. My name is Sarah Whitmore, and the house my mother left behind was never just a house. It was the center of our childhood, the place where every important memory began. That house held laughter, arguments, forgiveness, and warmth. My mother poured her life into it. And after she was gone, that house became the battlefield where my sister showed me who she really was. The day of the funeral passed in a blur. Black dresses, quiet sobs, polite condolences from people who didn't truly know my mother but felt obligated to say something kind. My sister, Laura, cried openly, loudly, dramatically. She clung to me as if she couldn't stand without my support. I held her because that's what sisters do when they lose their mother. I didn't know that while I was mourning, she was already calculating. In the weeks that followed, Laura suggested we meet at Mom's house to talk about arrangements. Her voice sounded gentle, almost caring. She said Mom would have wanted us to sit together in that house one last time and decide things peacefully. I agreed, because I still believed my sister was grieving the same way I was. Walking into that house felt like reopening a wound that hadn't healed. Mom's scent still lingered faintly in the hallway. Her favorite blanket was folded on the couch. Her coffee mug sat by the sink as if she might return any moment. I felt my throat tighten as memories flooded back: birthdays, holidays, late-night talks at the kitchen table. Laura walked through the rooms with a strange confidence. She touched the walls, opened drawers, commented on furniture placement. At first, I thought she was reminiscing. Looking back now, I realized she was surveying, measuring, claiming. She sat at the kitchen table and told me she had been thinking ahead. She said it would make sense for her to stay in the house. She said she was closer to work, that she had kids who could use the space that I had already built, my own life elsewhere. She spoke as if the decision had already been made. I asked her what she meant. She took a breath and said, calmly, I'm keeping Mom's house. For a moment, I didn't understand the words. They sounded unreal, like a line from a bad script. I laughed nervously, waiting for her to smile and tell me she was joking. She didn't. I asked her about the will. Laura hesitated just a fraction of a second, but enough for me to notice. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. Mom trusted me to handle everything, she said. She told me she wanted it this way. That didn't sound like my mother. My mom believed in fairness. She believed in balance. She would never exclude one child without explanation. Something felt deeply wrong. But grief has a way of silencing instincts you should listen to. I told Laura we should speak to the lawyer together. She agreed too quickly, her smile tight and forced. That should have been my first real warning. Days passed. Then weeks. Every time I asked about the lawyer, Laura gave vague answers. She said the paperwork was slow. She said I was stressing myself unnecessarily. She said I needed to trust her. Then one afternoon, I drove to Mom's house without telling her. Laura's car was in the driveway. I tried my key. It didn't work. My hands shook as I tried again. Nothing. The locks had been changed. When Laura finally opened the door, she didn't invite me in. She stood there, blocking the entrance, her expression cold. In that moment, every illusion shattered. This wasn't grief. This wasn't confusion. This was betrayal. That night, I sat alone, replaying everything. Every word. Every delay. Every lie that suddenly made sense. And then I remembered something my mother used to tell us when we were kids. Silence doesn't mean agreement. It means someone is waiting. The next morning, I made the call my sister hoped I wouldn't. I called the lawyer myself. And that was the moment everything began to change. The lawyer's office was quieter than I expected. No dramatic music, no tense voices. Just the soft hum of air conditioning and the smell of old paper. Yet the moment I gave my name, I felt something shift. The receptionist paused, typed a few things into her computer, then looked up at me with a careful smile. She told me the lawyer would see me shortly. That shortly felt like forever. I sat there, staring at my hands, thinking about how strange it was that my own sister had pushed me into this position. I had come expecting confusion, maybe clarification. I wasn't prepared for what came next. When the lawyer finally called me in, he didn't waste time with small talk. He asked how I was holding up after my mother's passing. His tone wasn't rehearsed. It was sincere. That alone made my throat tighten. I answered honestly. I told him I was grieving and confused, especially about the house. At the mention of the house, his expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. He leaned back slightly, folded his hands, and asked me a question that caught me completely off guard. Did your sister show you the will? I shook my head. I told him Laura said it wasn't very clear. I told him she claimed Mom wanted her to handle things. I watched his face carefully as I spoke. With every sentence, his concern became more obvious. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file. My mother's name was typed neatly on the tab. Seeing it written there made my chest ache. He placed the file between us and said words that would change everything. Your mother was very clear. My heart started pounding. He opened the file and slid a copy of the will toward me. I stared at it, afraid to touch it, as if it might disappear. He pointed to a specific section and explained that my mother had divided her estate equally between her children. No ambiguity. No vague instructions. No special favors. The house was to be shared. Not sold without mutual agreement. Not occupied by one without consent. Not transferred secretly. Shared. I felt dizzy. I asked him how Laura could have changed the locks. How she could act as if the house was already hers. He sighed, the kind of sigh that comes from seeing this story too many times before. She shouldn't have, he said quietly. Then he told me something that made my stomach drop even further. Laura had already contacted him. Alone. She had tried to push paperwork through without my knowledge. She had asked about ways to speed things up. She had implied that I wasn't interested in the property. None of it was true. That wasn't grief. That was strategy. The lawyer told me he hadn't approved anything yet. Something about Laura's urgency had made him hesitate. He wanted both heirs present. That was why nothing had moved forward legally despite Laura's confidence. For the first time since Mom died, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with rage. My sister hadn't won. Not yet. But she had tried. The lawyer asked me if Laura had changed the locks. When I said yes, his jaw tightened. He told me that was a serious issue. Changing locks on jointly inherited property without consent wasn't just immoral, it was legally problematic. He said something else that stuck with me. People who rush usually have something to hide. I left the office with copies of documents I should have been shown weeks ago. As I walked to my car, my hands shook not from fear, but from anger. My sister hadn't just betrayed my trust. She had tried to erase me. That evening, Laura called me. Her voice was light, casual, almost cheerful. She asked how I was doing. I told her I had met with the lawyer. The silence on the other end of the line was immediate and loud. She recovered quickly. She laughed nervously and said there must have been a misunderstanding. She told me I was overreacting. She said we were still family. That word sounded hollow coming from her mouth. I told her the lawyer had a copy of the will. I told her the house was shared. I told her changing the locks was unacceptable. My voice stayed calm, even as my heart raced. Laura's tone changed. She accused me of being selfish. She said I was trying to take advantage of her while she was handling everything. She said Mom trusted her more. Each sentence felt like another attempt to rewrite reality. I ended the call before she could say more. That night, I didn't cry. I sat quietly, reading through the will again and again. Every word felt like my mother speaking directly to me, reminding me that fairness still mattered even after death. Laura thought she could intimidate me into silence. She thought distance and delay would wear me down. What she didn't realize was that every move she made only strengthened my resolve. She wanted the house. I wanted the truth. And now, I had both the law and my mother's words on my side. What I didn't know yet was that the lawyer wasn't finished with Laura. Not even close. The official notice arrived 3 days later. Not to me, to Laura. I didn't know about it at first. I found out the way I always seem to find out everything lately. Through her panic. She called me just after sunrise. I could hear it in her breathing before she even spoke. The confidence she had worn like armor since Mom's funeral was gone. Her voice was tight, clipped. Like she was choosing every word carefully so it wouldn't betray her fear. She asked if I had put the lawyer up to this. I told her calmly that I hadn't needed to. The truth had done that all on its own. The notice was simple, according to the lawyer later. A formal request for a joint meeting. A reminder of the will. A warning about unauthorized changes to jointly inherited property. No accusations. No threats. Just facts, the kind that don't care how loud you scream. Laura didn't scream at the lawyer. She screamed at me. She accused me of trying to ruin her life. She said I was being dramatic. She said Mom would be ashamed of me. Each sentence felt rehearsed. Like she had practiced them in front of a mirror, hoping they would still work. They didn't. For the first time, I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to explain. I simply listened. And that's when she slipped. She mentioned the house taxes. I hadn't brought them up. The lawyer hadn't mentioned them to me yet. But Laura did, too quickly, too nervously. She said she had already handled them, that I shouldn't worry. After we hung up, I called the lawyer. He went quiet when I told him what she'd said. Then he asked me a question that made my chest tighten. Did your sister open any accounts in your mother's name after her death? I didn't know. That afternoon, I learned more than I had in weeks. Laura hadn't just changed the locks. She had redirected mail. She had delayed filing certain documents. She had paid property taxes from an account that didn't belong to her. An account that should have been frozen after Mom passed. It wasn't a mistake. It was control. The lawyer explained it gently, but clearly. These weren't just family issues anymore, these were legal ones. And Laura was standing on very thin ice. Still, I didn't rush. Revenge, I was learning, didn't require shouting. It required patience. That evening, I drove past the house. I didn't stop. I didn't knock. I just slowed down long enough to see the lights on in the living room, my mother's living room. The curtains were different. The porch light was new. Laura was already rewriting the space, trying to erase the past and replace it with her version of ownership. I sat in my car and let the anger settle into something colder, clearer. The next morning, the lawyer called again. Laura had responded to the notice. Not with cooperation but with urgency. She wanted the meeting immediately. She wanted to resolve everything quickly. She wanted signatures. That was when the lawyer said something I'll never forget. She's rushing because she knows time is no longer on her side. He told me to do nothing. No calls. No texts. No confrontations. Let her talk. Let her reveal herself. And she did. Laura started messaging me constantly. Long paragraphs about family. About forgiveness. About how Mom would want us to move on. Then shorter messages. Sharper ones. She accused me of turning people against her. She said neighbors were asking questions. She said the lawyer was being unfair. By the third day, the messages stopped. Silence is never empty. It's usually full of planning. The lawyer scheduled the meeting for the following week. Both of us. Same room. Same table. Same documents. I agreed. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop and labeled it simply, everything. Inside, I placed copies of the will. Emails, timestamps, notes from the lawyer. Records of Laura's messages, every small detail she assumed didn't matter. Because I finally understood something Laura never did. This wasn't about winning the house. It was about proving she had already lost the moment she decided to take it alone. And when we sat across from each other in that lawyer's office, she wouldn't be facing her little sister anymore. She'd be facing the truth. The day of the meeting arrived colder than the weather forecast had promised. I remember that because my hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from fear, but from the strange calm that comes right before something breaks. I arrived early, sat in my car for a few minutes, and watched people walk past the building without knowing how much of my life was about to be laid bare inside. When I finally went in, Laura was already there. She looked different. Not panicked. Not angry. Polished. Composed. Dressed in a way that felt intentional. Like she was stepping into a role she'd rehearsed. She smiled when she saw me. The kind of smile that tries to rewrite history in real time. Hey, she said softly. As if we were meeting for coffee instead of confronting months of lies. I nodded and took my seat across from her. The lawyer entered a moment later, carrying a thick folder, thicker than the one I remembered. He didn't smile. He didn't sit down right away. He closed the door behind him, and that sound alone made Laura shift in her chair. He began by laying out the purpose of the meeting. Joint inheritance. Clarification of assets. Unauthorized actions taken by one party. His voice was steady, professional, and completely indifferent to Laura's attempts at warmth. Laura spoke first. She talked about how hard the past few months had been. How she had stepped up when no one else could. How she believed she was honoring Mom's wishes by keeping the house intact. She spoke slowly, carefully, like someone who believed words alone could shape reality. Then the lawyer opened the folder. He didn't interrupt her. He waited. When she finally stopped talking, he slid a document across the table. It was a bank statement. Laura froze. The lawyer explained, calmly, that an account in my mother's name had been accessed after her death. Funds had been moved. Bills had been paid. Taxes had been handled but not legally. The account should have been frozen. Instead, it had been used. Laura tried to explain. She said it was temporary. She said she planned to fix it. She said she didn't think it mattered since it was family money. The lawyer asked her a simple question. Did you have written authorization? She didn't answer. He placed another document on the table. Then another. Mail redirection records. Locksmith receipts. A timeline of when the locks were changed. Copies of emails she had sent to the lawyer claiming I was uninterested in the property. Each piece landed like a quiet accusation. I watched her hands tremble. When the lawyer finally looked at me, his expression softened just slightly. He asked if I had been aware of any of these actions. I told the truth. Laura's composure cracked. She turned to me, her voice rising, accusing me of setting her up, of betraying her, of letting strangers judge family business. She said I was doing this out of spite. She said I had always resented her. I didn't respond. The lawyer did. He explained that intent didn't erase impact. That good intentions didn't cancel unauthorized actions. That inheritance law didn't bend for convenience or sibling rivalry. Then he revealed the document that changed everything. My mother had added an addendum to her will 6 months before she passed. An addendum Laura had never mentioned. In it, Mom specifically stated that if either child attempted to claim sole ownership of the house without mutual agreement, their share could be legally challenged. Laura stared at the paper as if it were written in another language. I felt something break open inside me, not satisfaction, not joy, but a deep, aching sadness. Mom had known this might happen. She had prepared for it. And Laura had ignored that warning entirely. The lawyer ended the meeting with clear instructions. The locks were to be changed back. Access restored. Any further financial actions were to be approved jointly. Failure to comply would escalate matters beyond civil discussion. Laura left without looking at me. I stayed behind. The lawyer told me I had done the right thing by staying quiet, by documenting, by waiting. He said cases like this often collapse under their own weight. As I walked out of the building, I realized something important. This wasn't revenge yet. This was exposure. And Laura was only beginning to understand what that felt like. Laura didn't wait long before making her next move. 2 days after the meeting, my phone started lighting up, not with messages from her, but from family members. Aunts I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousins who suddenly remembered my number. Even an uncle who never showed up for Mom's birthday calls. They all said the same thing, just in different voices. Why are you doing this to your sister? She's under a lot of stress. Can't you just let her keep the house? It didn't take a genius to figure out what had happened. Laura had gone on a campaign tour, telling her version of the story. In her version, she was the responsible daughter, the caretaker, the one who stayed close. I was the distant sister who only showed up when there was something to gain. I listened. I didn't argue. I thanked them for their concern and said very little. That silence confused them. People expect anger. They expect tears. Silence makes them uneasy. That same evening, Laura finally texted me. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She offered a deal. She said she'd let me take some money if I agreed to sign away my claim to the house. She framed it like generosity, like she was rescuing me from something complicated. I read the message 3 times before responding. I told her I wasn't interested. Her reply came fast and sharp. She accused me of dragging this out. She said the house meant more to her. She said I didn't understand what it felt like to live there with Mom during her final years. That part hurt. Because it was partly true. But what Laura didn't understand was that grief doesn't give you permission to rewrite the law or erase another person. The lawyer advised me to document everything. Again. Messages. Calls. Even secondhand pressure from relatives. Patterns matter in cases like this. Intent matters. Then he told me something that changed the way I saw the entire situation. Laura had missed a deadline. In her rush to secure control, she had failed to file a required disclosure on time. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. But it mattered. Legally, it weakened her position significantly. I didn't celebrate. I waited. That weekend, I finally returned to the house. For the first time since the locks were changed back. Walking through the front door felt surreal. The walls looked the same, but the air felt different. Like the house itself had been holding its breath. Laura wasn't there. I walked room to room slowly. I noticed what had been removed. What had been replaced. What had been hidden. In Mom's bedroom, I found something Laura had overlooked in her haste, a small locked drawer. I remembered from childhood. Inside were handwritten notes. Not a will. Not legal documents. Letters. Letters my mother had written but never sent. Some to me. Some to Laura. Some unfinished. In one of them, Mom wrote about how worried she was that grief would turn into competition. That love would turn into entitlement. She wrote that she hoped we would choose fairness over possession. I sat on the floor and cried for the first time since everything began. Not because of Laura. Because Mom had seen this coming and still believed we could do better. When Laura found out I had been in the house, she lost control. She called, yelling, accusing me of snooping. Of stealing memories that weren't mine. I let her speak until she ran out of breath. Then I said one sentence. I found Mom's letters. The silence on the other end was immediate. She asked what they said. I told her the truth. She hung up. A few days later, the lawyer called again. Laura had requested another meeting. Urgent. She wanted to renegotiate. Her tone, according to him, was no longer confident, just afraid. I agreed to meet. Not because I wanted peace, but because I was finally ready to finish what she started. The second meeting felt nothing like the first. Laura arrived late this time. Gone was the polished confidence, the carefully chosen outfit, the practiced smile. She looked tired, worn down, like someone who had been running from something, and finally realized there was nowhere left to hide. When she sat down, she didn't look at me. The lawyer didn't wait for small talk. He opened with a summary: missed deadlines, unauthorized financial activity, failure to comply fully with the previous instructions. His voice wasn't sharp. It didn't need to be. Facts do the damage quietly. Laura interrupted him. She said she wanted to resolve this as a family. She said lawyers were complicating things. She said Mom would hate seeing us like this. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She cried. Not softly. Not privately. She broke down right there at the table, talking about how alone she felt after Mom died. How the house was the only place that still felt stable. How she had been afraid that if she didn't hold on tightly enough, she'd lose everything. For a moment, I almost reached for her hand. Almost. But then I remembered the locks. The lies. The paperwork she tried to rush through without me. Fear explains behavior. It doesn't excuse it. When the lawyer asked if she had anything else to add, Laura finally looked at me. Her eyes were red, but there was something else there too: calculation. She offered a new deal. She said she would buy me out at a fair price. She said she'd already spoken to a realtor. She said it would be faster, easier, and less painful for everyone. The lawyer turned to me. It was my turn to speak. I told them I had something to submit. I placed a folder on the table, thinner than the lawyer's, but heavier in impact. Inside were copies of the letters I had found. Not all of them. Just enough. I explained that these were handwritten notes from our mother, written months before she passed. I didn't read them aloud. I didn't need to. I only said one thing. She knew this might happen. Laura's face collapsed. The lawyer read silently for a moment, then looked up. He explained that while the letters weren't legally binding, they were relevant, especially given the addendum to the will and Laura's actions afterward. Then he delivered the sentence that changed everything. Given the circumstances, the safest and cleanest legal path forward was not Laura keeping the house at all. The recommendation was to force a sale. Laura stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She said she'd never agree. She said this was betrayal. She said I was destroying the last piece of Mom she had left. I stayed seated. I told her something I had practiced in my head for weeks. I didn't destroy this. You did when you decided it was yours alone. The lawyer explained the next steps. If Laura refused to cooperate, the court could intervene. Costs would increase. Control would decrease. Time would drag this out until there was nothing left to fight over but resentment. Laura sat back down. Defeated. After the meeting, she followed me into the hallway. For the first time since Mom died, she spoke to me without anger or performance. She asked me if there was any way to fix this. I told her the truth. There was. Before you changed the locks. We didn't hug. We didn't reconcile. We simply walked away in opposite directions. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because I had won, but because I had finally stopped losing myself to someone else's entitlement. The house was no longer a weapon. It was just a house again. And Laura was about to learn what happens when you build your plans on something that was never truly yours. The sale took longer than I expected. Not because of legal delays, but because Laura resisted every step as if slowing time might somehow reverse the truth. She questioned valuations. She argued over timelines. She tried, one last time, to convince the lawyer that she should be allowed to stay in the house until everything was finalized. The answer was no. For the first time in months, the rules applied equally to both of us. When the realtor put up the sign, I drove by without stopping. I didn't want my last memory of the house to be a transaction. I wanted it to stay what it had always been in my mind, a place where my mother laughed too loudly, where the kitchen light stayed on late, where fairness had once felt simple. Laura moved out 2 weeks later. I didn't help her pack. She didn't ask me to. The lawyer handled everything with the same calm professionalism he had shown from the beginning. The proceeds were split exactly as the will stated. No favors. No shortcuts. No manipulation left to try. When the final papers were signed, I felt something unexpected. Not victory. Not triumph. Just relief. Laura didn't speak to me for a long time after that. When she finally did, it wasn't to argue. It wasn't to accuse. It was a short message, sent late at night. I never thought you'd stand your ground. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. I never thought I'd have to. That was the last real conversation we had. People ask me now if it was worth it. If fighting my own sister drained me. If I regret not letting it go. I tell them the truth. I didn't fight for the house. I fought for my place in the story. For months, Laura tried to make me smaller, quiet, distant, irrelevant. She counted on my grief to weaken me. My kindness to slow me down, my silence to protect her. What she didn't understand was that silence can also be preparation. Revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like documentation. Like patience. Like letting someone reveal themselves fully before stepping aside and letting consequences do the rest. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make threats. I didn't take more than what was mine. And in the end, that's exactly why I won. The house is gone now. Someone else lives there. The lights turn on and off for strangers. Life moved forward, just like it always does. But I kept something far more valuable than property. I kept my dignity. And Laura? She kept the lesson she never wanted to learn. That love doesn't give you ownership. That grief doesn't excuse betrayal. And that when you try to take everything, you often end up with nothing. Some people think revenge has to be loud. I learned it doesn't. Sometimes, the strongest revenge is letting the truth speak for itself. If this story moved you, if it made you think, make sure you subscribe to the channel Family Feud Files for more real, emotional family stories like this. Thank you for listening.